If you see a good move, wait. Look for a better one. These were words written by Alexander Kotov, a Soviet chess grandmaster and author. In his book, Think Like a Grandmaster, Kotov invites a certain level of forethought and strategy, inviting his readers to consider such things. If you see a good move, wait. Look for a better one. Now, before you go asking, my husband, and not I, is the chess player in the family. Kevin competed in tournaments as a teenager, and he was nationally ranked for a time as well. I do not possess anything approaching that level of skill in chess, but it's fun and humbling to play a game with him every so often. I come from a line of players, including my father and brother. And Kevin is a good teacher. He's begun showing moves and strategies to Zach, who very easily beats the computer these days. Chess is fun. It's also a game that requires great forethought and concentration and patience. Kotov's words came to mind as I was reflecting upon our passage for this morning. In this short little story from Mark, we see Jesus always thinking a couple of moves ahead in contrast to the disciples and the others in the story. We begin with him healing Simon Peter's mother-in-law, which is an amazing act in and of itself. But then the pieces begin to actually approach him, one after the other after the other. The text actually says that they brought to Jesus all who were sick and demon-possessed. All. An entire city's worth of sick people. Can you imagine how Jesus must have felt after such a day? I imagine actually many of you can. This was one of those weary days at work, right? Where all you want to do is get home, change into pajamas, and crawl under the covers. Jesus has more than earned a solid night's rest and maybe even that mental health day for the next day, right? But then we see Jesus do a couple of pretty extraordinary things. The scriptures say, in the early hours of the morning, while it was still dark, he gets his weary bones out of bed and goes to a deserted place to pray. Even there, he is quickly sought after and found, and the disciples say, everyone has been looking for you. But Jesus tells them, let's go on in our journey to other towns. That is what I came to do. So off they go to do more ministry somewhere else. We've been talking about call a bit in this season of Epiphany, in these weeks leading up to Lent. We've talked about how one might discern a call, how one listens. We've talked about how we need others to help us discern a call. And last week, or 2 weeks ago, we talked about the challenge that it can be to drop nets, right? And replace them with something that is holier and better. This week, we're challenged with a different element of call. We're challenged with the temptation to ignore it. The temptation to make a good move rather than the best move. At this time in Jesus' ministry, he has just arrived to Capernaum, a small town in the region of Galilee, which is on the banks of the Sea of Tiberias, the Sea of Galilee. I spent a couple of days there in early 2020. Yes, I started 2020 traveling. The year started so well. It had such potential, and then it changed. But I did start 2020 in Israel and spent some time traveling around this very large lake. It's just incredibly beautiful. One of the things we did while I was there was to get our jet-lagged selves out of bed in time to catch the sunrise as it streamed over the lake. It was so lovely. And it's easier for me, having experienced that, to picture Jesus on the brink of daybreak, gazing out at this view and praying to God. It's a very peaceful time early in the morning before the rest of the world wakes up and gets busy. Beloved of God, how often do you take time away? Time to listen and just be with God. Taking time apart from our overscheduled days, whether it's a day off work, or a quiet walk in the woods, or catching a morning sunrise, or even just taking 5 minutes between meetings to not dash off that other email, but to just sit and offer up a prayer. These choices can be very life-giving for schedules and spirits. I've preached from here about this often. I think we all know what a gift it can be to slow down and to really rest. But here's a deeper wondering that occurred to me from this passage this time. Jesus was likely very, very tired when he decided to then get up early and be with God. It makes me wonder why he chooses to do this. Surely he could have prayed to God later in the day. Why, after a full day of ministry, does Jesus choose to then get up early and start with prayer? This is something that Mother Teresa used to do, actually, if folks have heard this. When she had a bigger schedule in a day that she knew was coming, she would get up an extra hour early to pray. Most of us are not Mother Teresa, and most of us are not Jesus, though. So sometimes these questions of the text are important to ask. What else might be going on here? And I think there might be more in his decision to take this particular time away from other things. It's easier to hear God's voice when the din from the rest of the world is muted, even if only for a short while. But I don't think Jesus was just doing a morning devotional here, starting the day off right, as many folks would consider it to be. Maybe that was part of it, but I think he was doing something else. I think he was trying to discern the next steps for his ministry. Evidently, Jesus had already made a good chess move when coming to Capernaum. Word about him was spreading, and he was gaining quite the following. It had been a red letter day for his ministry. He cured practically the entire city of illness. That's astounding. In this story, we see Jesus at the start of his ministry and at the top of his game, really. He's pretty much on fire and wildly popular. The disciples find him and say, "Everyone is looking for you." So folks, if you have this kind of success in what you're doing as a profession, would you be inclined to stick with it, staying and doing more work where you are welcome? That's a pretty smart move. And yet, this is where we see Jesus intentionally turning to God. And while the text doesn't say this outright, I think it's reasonable to wonder if he was listening for clarity in what he was supposed to do next. When the disciples find him, "Everyone is looking for you," they say, and Jesus clearly says, "No, let's go into the neighboring towns instead. That's what I came here to do." Folks, this is like a wildly successful CEO saying, "Nah, this is going too well. I think I'll go back to square one and tinker in my garage until another business venture comes my way. This is what I'm supposed to do." This is wildly illogical. It makes no sense. If you have a good thing, you stick with it, right? Well, if you see a good move, wait. Look for a better one. Of course, taken to the extreme, this could make us into overly cautious, even uncommitted people. For those who follow chess, we know that chess is, unless it's a friendly game between two people, it's a timed venture. So there is limited time to think through the next move and to go forward. So if we take this idea of let's just wait for the next good thing to come by, we could be doing this for an exceptionally long time. So there is a caution there. But on the other hand, this story is also a cautionary tale when the temptation is to stay with a good move, to stay with what is safe, to stay with what is known, what is comfortable, to stay in a situation that you feel comfortable with is very enticing and seductive. And it makes sense, too. But God takes this instinct, and any Hamilton fans out there, turns the world upside down. If we are continuing in the drop your nets and follow me vein of that sermon from a few weeks ago, we realize that there is a safe, logical script we absolutely can follow. We can keep on being regular fishermen, throwing out that net where we think we should. But if we see a good move, maybe we are called to wait and look for the better one. A lot of people get lost between seeing a good move and waiting. They will stay with the good move. But that safe, logical script is often the one that God wishes to flip. Beloved of God, our God is a God. I never say that phrase, so obviously I trip over it, clearly, right? That's what happened. Okay, our God is a God who tends to call people to do things like lead thousands through deserts for decades, deepening their discernment and dependence in that time frame. Our God is a God who speaks truth from a lion's den to those courageous enough to be sent there. Our God is a God who, for Cole Arthur Riley in our book, in the chapters due for this week, takes our feelings into account but calls us towards liberation as we embrace them and let them help us determine how to lead. Our God is a God who chose not to continue to do ministry until a ripe old age, but who chose to go down a path that led to the cross. And if that's not the most unimpressive way to start a fledgling ministry, I don't know what is. What if Jesus had pursued popularity, stayed in Capernaum, where he was already successful? What if he had ignored the prayerfully discerned holy nudge to keep moving into other towns, to continue to spread his message? To ignore such a call might mean to stay with something good, but it will almost certainly mean missing out on something better. There's a risk here. Where is God calling us to go? Jesus takes time to pray about this because he knows he needs to. He needs clarity on whether to stay in the good place he has cultivated or whether to look at the possibilities that are out there elsewhere. And if Jesus needed to take time to pray and discern and actually take time away from ministry to retreat to a quiet place to do this, maybe we do too. It takes humility and centeredness to look at the chessboard and say, okay, I could do this, but I don't know for sure if that is the right thing. I can see these 3 moves ahead, and they're pretty good, but God, you hold the whole board in your vista. What do you see? Sometimes we need to step away in order to see more clearly. Sometimes we need to pray for help in being able to see more clearly. And always, this kind of prayerful discernment draws us into a listening place. Listening for the answer from our teacher God, who can see so many moves further ahead than we. And so, children of God, as we look towards our church's future, may we endeavor to be prayerful, thoughtful. It can be so easy to get excited about the possibilities and just surge ahead. If we contemplate our next moves for too long, we won't do anything. We need to find the middle space. The middle space that leads us not just towards something good that we've always done, but towards something better with thought and care. Jesus needed that time away to get to that understanding, and it might take us a little bit longer as we live into this new structure of ministry, as we go into our surrounding town and see what good trouble we can get into. But rest assured, God will take things from there. God will lead us to a future far better than we could ever have fashioned on our own. And when that clarity does not come, when the times of sitting with God and the dreary hours do not show us the way, I invite us to rest assured once again. Clarity comes in time. Until then, may we persevere in looking for the better, in listening, in waiting for the sun to rise over the lake, so that we can take in this beautiful vista of our lives and give thanks to our kingly God. May it be so. In the name of God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.